Could Microsoft reasonably purchase more after this, or is this the end of their ability to purchase?
But yeah, I think they have designs on purchasing more.
But if they went after like a Take-Two or an EA, would there be a problem?
No.
Yeah, look at them galloping. These bodies can't believe what's happening. No. Mans are shook because of Microsoft's checkbook. Pour one out for the leader, and one for the biggest cheerleader. Depiction of PlayStation is all based on nothing more than just fiction, logical fallacy, and all contradictions. I find it quite interesting, the lengths that some people will go to bemoan the likes of Xbox after spending years ridiculing them for not being a viable competitor. Mockery quickly turned to fear and then turned into full concern for the industry. This is coming from a subset of gamers who routinely chastise almost all other platforms because of the supposed clear superiority of PlayStation, this untouchable behemoth that no matter what its conduct, they defended and still do. But the same standards do not appear to apply to Xbox. Now, as Xbox finally sinks its teeth into the gaming pie, I observe the restless writhing around in Herculean leaps in logic to try and paint Sony, the aggressive market leader, as some sort of victim, or even more laughably, the more honorable conductor of business in this space. And today I will discuss a clip of Colin Moriarty of Last Stand Media and how he views the business.
I think the thing that attracts me to PlayStation, or one of the things that attracts me to PlayStation, it's hard for me to, I don't want to be an asshole, but I really think a lot of my detractors, so-called, don't really know what they're talking about. Because
he doesn't think his detractors know what they're talking about. Well, let's break down his comments, have a listen, shall we? So we can better assess what he's actually on about, and perhaps make up our own minds about how informed Colin Moriarty really is on the matter.
There's no comparison. There just simply is no comparison to the way Sony has treated its developers and the way Microsoft has treated its developers, the output of games, and the way that these studios have been acquired. And I find that to just be an interesting through line. You can throw your money around all you want, and that's totally fine, and that's totally a legitimate way of doing business.
Well, business principally does involve money, so yes, Colin, it is legitimate. In fact, it's one of the only ways of conducting business. But Sony knows this all too well, though. After all, check out the legacy of PlayStation before the console was even launched.
They had to find software somewhere.
We knew that in order to be successful, we had to capture the hearts and minds of the developers and the publishers equally.
So what they did was they went on a very aggressive campaign to all the developers.
Sony does everything it can to round up third-party developers to support the PlayStation and is able to sign 250 in Japan alone. Sony also spends $48 million to purchase Psygnosis, the European developer behind Lemmings, and changes its name to Sony Interactive Entertainment. In December of 1994, Sony releases the PlayStation.
Legitimate. So, the beginning of PlayStation is marked by consolidation. Before its console is even released, $48 million at that time was no small amount. An acquisition of a third-party publisher and then renaming it, the kind of assimilation that would make the Borg proud. I wonder how Colin views Microsoft's acquisition of Rare. Is he as flippant and relaxed about that as well?
But I, as a creative person, as a consumer, I don't have to respect what you do, and I don't really respect that particular angle towards video gaming.
And that's fine. I, as a creative person, also do not respect the way the so-called market leader is conducting itself, or has done over the years, which I will get into shortly. I certainly don't much respect the crocodile tears shed on this whole consolidation issue either.
Commoditization of gaming is not good for gaming. And PlayStation has never done that. So you can, and neither has Nintendo. So you can't really go, Nintendo, the Sony's biggest purchase, which was Bungie, is 20 times cheaper than Activision Blizzard.
Sorry, why does Sony's biggest purchase at $3.6 billion not count? Relative to Sony's net worth, that is a lot of money. Look at the comparative wealth of Microsoft and Sony. But because Sony cannot afford to spend as much money as Microsoft, we're going to skew the definitions of commoditization and consolidation to fit Colin's narrative. For someone whose moniker is no taxation and a proponent of Western capitalism, I find this position at odds with what Colin supposedly stands for. But maybe Microsoft should place a cap on its spending and be a little bit more considerable of its competition, considering how comparatively poor the market leader PlayStation is, because apparently that's how business works.
You can't really go... Nintendo, the Sony's biggest purchase, which was Bungie, is 20 times cheaper than Activision Blizzard. I mean, this is and Sony explicitly keeps them third party because they know that that's probably good for them.
And Sony explicitly keeps them third party because they know that that's probably good for them.
Falsehood, huh? When falsehood weighs itself against the truth, falsehood perishes, because falsehood by its very nature is bound to perish. Sony does not keep Bungie third party, having left Microsoft and then joining Activision, and then having a bitter divorce with that publisher. Bungie wanted to retain independence, hence that precondition to its purchase. And anyone with any awareness in this space will be aware that, were it up to Sony, there is no way in hell that Sony would have permitted Bungie to remain independent if it had a choice. Sony's desperate bid for a studio that can actually do multiplayer well is apparent, not only from the inflated cost of its acquisition, but a big part of that sum being allocated to the retention of its staff. And Colin must know this. This is a man who doesn't believe express statements from the likes of Microsoft and Phil Spencer, but here stretches out the truth. Why? Why be so willfully ignorant, or worse, perhaps completely disingenuous? It's also interesting to observe the U-turn Colin has supposedly now made on this. When it was announced that PlayStation was purchasing Bungie, he had this to say: in purchasing Bungie, Sony signals its willingness to participate in mindless expansion. What do you think Sony's been doing all these years? As Colin wrestles with his innate desire to somehow paint PlayStation in a positive, more noble light, the inconsistency becomes increasingly apparent. He morphs the definitions of words to suit his liking, their application wildly differing when applied to the context of PlayStation compared to Xbox.
Commoditization of gaming is not good for gaming.
When it comes to PlayStation, consolidation is fine because comparatively, the value of their transaction is smaller than their competition. Despite the fact that $3.6 billion for a single studio is still an eye-watering amount. Compare that to the $7 billion Microsoft spent on the entirety of ZeniMax and its suite of studios.
The only studio that Sony ever bought that it didn't work with first, ever, before the modern era when things started to change, of course, is Psygnosis. And that was before PlayStation even existed. And Psygnosis' biggest game is Lemmings. So I think we're talking about, or Shadow of the Beast or something. So we're talking about two different things.
Hold on there. You're just going to gloss over the fact that PlayStation's legacy started with consolidation, but goalposts then shift to the modern era. Lemmings may not be big now, but Psygnosis was not a small purchase at the time. It's a reflection of PlayStation's predisposition for consolidation and strikes at the very heart of what you're trying to say.
But when a Sony founds a Sony Santa Monica, or a Sony buys a Sucker Punch after working with them for a long time, or buys an Insomniac, or buys a Guerrilla, or does all these things, Housemarque and so on.
Notice how many times he used the word buys, and he could have used that word plenty more times discussing PlayStation and its slate of first-party studios.
These are second-party relationships that they made into first-party relationships by having the foresight, much like a general manager in a sports team has the foresight of knows who's the draft, which is why this team is better than this team, even though everyone again plays by the same rules.
Relationships. What were the relationships that they had with Bungie, Colin? Perhaps you mean the relationships they forged when they money-hatted Destiny content exclusively for PlayStation. Well, then maybe the whole industry is fair game for Sony, considering how strong its proclivity for money-hatting deals is. The laughable thing is, Bungie is the studio that created Halo for Xbox. It is the studio that made Xbox what it is today.
Bungie is, of course, the creator of Halo, and without Halo, there would be no Xbox. Without Halo, the Xbox would have failed. Microsoft would not be in gaming right now. And so it is absolutely wild.
If you were going to pick one studio for all studios in the world that point to inorganic consolidation, it would be Sony acquiring Bungie. That would be like Microsoft acquiring Naughty Dog. When Colin defends consolidation, he talks about,
these are second-party relationships that they made into first-party relationships by having the foresight, much like a general manager in a sports team.
But when Microsoft acquired a studio as small as Double Fine, all those second-party relationships were irrelevant to him. Double Fine that launched Psychonauts 1 as a premier title for the original Xbox console exclusively, Colin questioned even that. Because
what was the point of Double Fine? I mean, obviously Psychonauts 2 is really great, but in terms of culture.
So the goalposts shift again. When we discuss Xbox, if a second-party relationship exists with a provable history, he points at something as vague and frankly irrelevant as culture. Perhaps Colin may want to offer up his no doubt extremely narrow parameters for what he deems permissible as an acquisition for Microsoft. You'll probably want to suggest Blue Box Game Studios behind abandoned title Abandoned.
So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's the reason that I feel like it matters and it's interesting. Now, is it going to matter to the consumer? I have no idea. Probably not. But it matters to me. I'm an analyst and I'm interested in the ecosystem, and I like to know that things come from a more organic, creative first point of view.
Tell me this. Is aggressive money hatting of third-party titles over a multitude of years
from a more organic, creative first point of view?
Simply chucking money at third parties purely to deprive other platforms of having those games? Sony has engaged in that constantly. So as you bemoan consolidation very selectively, Colin, I would urge you to at least try and think as a consumer.
Now, is it going to matter to the consumer? I have no idea. Probably not.
And there it is. These tiers behind consolidation. They are loaded with sodium, more than the daily recommended amount. But by buying these studios or publishers, you as a platform holder are owning their problems as well as reaping any benefits. But with Sony and its aggressive and sustained money hatting antics right from the start of its premiership, from Tomb Raider 2 to today, what you're actually suggesting is
you can throw your money around all you want, and that's totally fine, and that's totally a legitimate way of doing business.
Well, I don't agree with that. And frankly,
I, as a creative person, as a consumer, I don't have to respect what you do, and I don't really respect that particular angle towards video gaming.
It's all well and good bemoaning consolidation generally. I get the general concerns, but when it all boils down to the very details of the deals we are talking about, all I observe is remarkable silence. As a consumer and gamer, have you not seen Blizzard's reputation plummet over the years? Do you not want another StarCraft game? Have you heard of the views of the developers within the studios and what they actually want? Do you care? Would their conditions be worse or better under Microsoft? What about their issues with the current manager, Bobby Kotick? Yes, he gets his golden parachute and exit, but that is the only way you get to cut off the head of the snake. Or do you want a sustained period of oppression within Activision, huh? Want to suggest an alternative? What about the games? What about all those dormant IPs? What about competition? Should Sony keep doing what it does and money hat Call of Duty, depriving Xbox gamers of content like it's currently doing? Set aside your Xbox intolerance for a moment, and perhaps you might see why this little shock to Sony's system could help energize the industry. Tell you what, Colin, I'll make Microsoft's acquisition of ABK much more palatable for you specifically. Microsoft is an American company. Imagine if the Chinese, or worse, the Arabs purchased them instead. We know exactly how you feel about the mere notion of that, right?
Done in public, be a beheading by sword. Women are second-class citizens in Saudi Arabia. with virtually no rights. So again, nothing to really add there. Just want to continue to nail home what's happening. I'm telling you guys what's happening. I mean, we're going to get a lot of their money, and people are going to sell out, like this Brian Ward guy who moved to Riyadh. The man moved to Saudi Arabia from the United States to run their game, to normalize their game development. Fuck you, dude.
An American man living in the United States, defending his favorite corporation, which is Japanese, bemoans consolidation by an American one. It's not even Eid yet I'm bestowed with such blessings. Mashallah.